we also need to do training on maintenance, how to live and work in this environment and not just do the research.
All right, as you look here at Commander Nick Hague, I want to talk a little bit about him. U.S. Space Force Colonel Nick Hague is your Crew 9 commander. He was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013. This will be his second space flight to the International Space Station. In 2018, he and his Soyuz crewmate experienced a catastrophic rocket booster malfunction after launch. They were forced to abort but landed safely. 5 months later, Hague launched on another Soyuz and served as flight engineer for expeditions 59 and 60, and of course, a safe mission to the ISS. He spent a total of 203 days in space and performed 3 spacewalks. The Kansas native is a test pilot and a distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Nick spent 5 months in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He voluntarily transferred from the United States Air Force to the Space Force in 2021 and is an active colonel. His wife, Katie, is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, and they have 2 sons. Nick is certainly ready for this role, a role, Zena, that you had trained for, but a switch was made.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Nick is going to be the commander of this flight today. This will be his second long-duration mission to the International Space Station, but as you just mentioned, his third launch to space. I'm really excited for him, and actually his crewmate on that Soyuz that aborted will be joining him on the International Space Station.
How about that? Well, they'll be reunited after their unfortunate circumstance on that first flight, but they did make it to space, and they did do some great while they were on that particular mission.
That's exactly right, and this is really a testament to these systems work when we need them to.
Indeed. Well, as we mentioned, this is the suit-up room. It's one of many rooms on the 3rd floor of the Neil A. Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building that make up crew quarters. The crew has been living and working in crew quarters for more than 2 weeks now. Let's talk a little bit now about his fellow crew member, Hague's fellow crew member, talking about Alexander Gorbunov. This is mission specialist Alexander Gorbunov's first time going to space. He studied engineering with qualifications in spacecraft in upper stages from the Moscow Aviation Institute. Gorbunov graduated from the military department with a specialty in operation and repair of aircraft, helicopters, and aircraft engines. Before his cosmonaut selection in 2018, he worked as an engineer for a rocket space corporation and helped support cargo spacecraft launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
That's exactly right. It's great to see Alexander looking good in his suit today. He has been an incredible asset to the team, Crew 9. I'm so grateful that I got to spend the last 18 months training with him and with Nick. They are both flying today in roles that are slightly different than the ones they originally trained for, but they are both ready to step up.
And talk a little bit about that, Zena. Initially, he was trained as pilot. Now he's in the commander position, but he also has to cover some of the responsibilities of the pilot, right? Because Gorbunov is still mission specialist, though he's also upped his level of ability for this mission as well.
Yeah, certainly. It is an unusual circumstance. So the mindset for today is that Nick Hague is the commander, and we're referring to it as a single-seat commander. So he will be in charge of the vehicle, taking over the commander role. It's a step up, certainly, from the pilot role, but something that he's well trained to do. And the difference between transitioning from the pilot to the commander role is less of a difference than it would be to transition from mission specialist to pilot. And we simply did not have enough time to complete all of that training, although Alex is an incredible crewmate and a very capable cosmonaut. And so Alex will be flying in the seat that Nick was physically training in. Nick will be flying in the seat that I was physically training in, but they will both be sharing these duties. Alex will be backing up Nick in a lot of the duties, but Nick will be the commander of the spacecraft.
And a little more insight into the decision that you touched on that was made on the crew assignments once this mission was changed from a crew of 4 to a crew of 2. NASA Chief Astronaut Joe Acaba, of course, made the call to fly Hague as the spacecraft commander. Acaba had to balance flying a NASA crew member with previous spaceflight experience to command the flight, while also making sure that the agency maintains an integrated crew with a Roscosmos cosmonaut who can operate that agency's critical systems aboard station for continued safe station operations. So a lot went into that decision, and we heard from NASA leadership in the press conference yesterday, and they said, look, you know, we had to make that call of experience in which it leaned, but they said it was a very, very close call between you and Nick. Very, very close. But it went to the experience, and you've been a professional about this. You're here on the broadcast talking about it, which, you know, I got to commend you for that as well.
Thanks.
But they said, look, you're going to fly. You're going to get a mission, and it'll be soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a very privileged problem to have. If I can say, I don't know exactly when my launch to space will be, but I know that I will get there. That's a really great position to be in. I am here today to support my crewmates and to support the astronaut office and to support the International Space Station mission as a whole. As you just mentioned, it is really important to us that we maintain these international partnerships. It is an international space station, and so flying Alexander in that role enables that international partnership. It also facilitates my colleague Don Pettit and his seat launching on a Soyuz rocket just a few weeks ago. So they will all be together on the space station as an expedition crew, and I'm really proud to be supporting my crewmates here.
Well said. Back into the room here, you can see everyone who is in the room. We have some supporting astronauts. You see Shannon Walker there off to the left, Deputy Chief of the Astronaut Office. And you see the folks who are dressed up in black. Those are the SpaceX support team.
Yeah, that's exactly
It looks like
right.
Norm Knight made it back from Russia.
Yes, indeed.
Director of flight operations.
Yeah, Norm Knight there in the beige jacket. He was supporting the Soyuz launch just a few weeks ago, but made it back in time to be with the crew. It's really amazing to have his support as the head of the Flight Operations Directorate. And in the blue suit just behind Alex there is Kostya Borisov. He was a mission specialist on Crew 7, actually, and is here supporting Alex.
Right, and right between him, that's Luke Delaney.
That's
he's
correct.
an astronaut, but he's in the SpaceX outfit there. There he is in his
That's
blue
right,
suit.
Luke Delaney, yes. So he is a member of the Flies class, the class just younger than the Turtles. And so it's been great to see him taking over this role. He is the astronaut support person, or ASP, so he will actually be riding in the Teslas with Nick and Alex and helping them get to the pad and get to their capsule safely. And then in between Luke and Norm Knight is Chaz Tacheny. He's our VITO, Vehicle Iteration and Test Office mission lead for Crew 9.
Zena, how long does it take for crews to train together for a launch, and what does that training entail?
Yeah, so as a crew, we are training for about 18 months together, and that training includes a lot of training in Hawthorne. As you see pictured here, this is Nick and Alex in Hawthorne, California, and we also have some simulators in Houston, Texas, training in the Dragon capsule itself. The large majority of our time is spent training for the International Space Station as opposed to our launch vehicle. But the launch vehicle is something that we don't train for until about the last 6 or 8 months of training before we get to the ISS. So it really takes a lot of work, a lot of practice, so that on launch day, everything is very familiar.
There they are coming out of the hatch.
That's exactly
doing
right.
that training you're talking about.
Yep. This training pictured here is for an unassisted egress in case they landed somewhere and rescue forces weren't immediately available to help them out of the capsule. So something that we practice for but hope to never use.
Right.
But of course, as we know, it's always good to practice for unexpected situations.
And the red stuff, those are the life-preserving items.
That's right,
supplies,
yeah.
Like a raft. And
There's a
some
life
flotation.
raft on board the Dragon, exactly right.
Very good. And so, as you can tell, Zena has great knowledge and insight into the mission today and into spaceflight in general. And so, if you're watching right now, want to invite you to participate in the show. If you'd like to ask a question over the next 4.5 hours, just jump on X, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. Send your question in.
Countdown, T-minus 3 hours, 50 minutes. Suit leak checks are complete, and then side hatches coming open imminently.
All right, good update there from the SpaceX launch director. 2 good suit leak checks, and they're opening up the hatch out at the pad. But again, hashtag #AskNASA. Use that on the platforms X, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch, along with your question, and we will try and answer that question live. While they get ready to go here, take a few pictures and with some of the team and talk to the crew before they get ready to head out here. I want to talk a little bit more about what led to the configuration of this mission today. The other 2 astronauts who are not flying today but will technically become part of Crew 9 and Expedition 72 when Nick and Alexander arrive to the ISS are, of course, Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams. Butch Wilmore, he has flown on 3 missions, performed 4 spacewalks, and flown in 3 spacecraft, Shuttle, Soyuz, and Starliner. And Sonny, she has flown on 3 missions, performed 7 spacewalks, and also flown in 3 spacecraft, Shuttle, Soyuz, and Starliner. Starliner arrived to the International Space Station on its test flight. This happened back in June, and we have video of it. There it is. You can see here Sonny and Butch gliding into the ISS for the welcome ceremony. Sonny, of course, pumped as she was dying to get back onto the station. But after experiencing some technical issues with Starliner, NASA extended Butch and Sonny's stay on the ISS by weeks so teams could perform in-space and ground testing, along with holding agency meetings to review the data. During that time, the pair of astronauts conducted research and performed maintenance on the orbiting lab. But in early September, Starliner undocked without its crew from the ISS as a result of NASA's decision to prioritize astronaut safety over the test flight. And then roughly 6 hours after it pulled away from the International Space Station, as you can see here, just after midnight on September 7th, in this infrared video, you can see Starliner landing under parachutes at the White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico. Successful touchdown there. Starliner performed a series of burns leading up to the successful touchdown back on Earth and, of course, brought that 3-month test flight to a conclusion. And here's what Sonny and Butch had to say.
I was so happy it got home with no problems. We saw it fly away, and then we all got up. The whole crew got up at 3 in the morning, and we had it up on our iPads watching it land.
It was wonderful that it made it back. And the fact that we weren't on it didn't even come into mind at all.
We're here with our friends. We've got a ride home. And, we're looking forward to the next couple months and doing a lot of stuff for the International Space Station.
And so they are now, once we get everybody aboard here today, going to be part of Expedition 72 and have a lot of science work that they will do. They'll be up there for a while. But if everything goes as planned and they return with Nick and Alexander on a Crew Dragon, then they will be, fun fact, the first astronauts to fly 4 different spacecraft that have launched and returned to Earth.
That is a fun fact. Actually, really amazing. It's
hard to do.
It's difficult to do. Yes, that is quite the accolade. It's really actually incredible to me that I work with so many people, so many astronauts in our office who have now flown 2 different or 3 different types of spacecraft. And I mean, what a time to be alive that we have that many different spacecraft in operation. That's pretty neat.
It's a great point. And to your point, to talk about just how few astronauts that have done this, if we kind of change the qualification to which astronaut has flown 4 spacecraft previously and not put the qualifier of launching from Earth and returning to Earth, it goes to an astronaut who is in this room on a picture in the background. That's John Young, who flew of course, Gemini, shuttle, but then the Apollo crew module.
That's
and
right.
the Apollo lunar module.
That is truly amazing.
And he's in that picture, that photo there that you can see at the very top of the screen.
Yep, just above that Crew 9 patch. That's an amazing tie to history that this room and this building share. It's really, really special to get to suit up in this actual room.
And so this is a tradition here. There's Shannon Walker with the two crew members laying out the rules to a card game. This is a tradition that happens before the crew can leave the suit-up room. Someone plays the crew. This someone is the case. It's Shannon Walker, the deputy astronaut chief. She'll play the commander and crew member, and they will play until the commander loses. That way, the team gets their bad luck out of the way and can now move on with nothing but good luck through launch.
That's exactly right. I think spaceflight in general is full of traditions, especially on launch day. This is one of them that is just a really fun part of it. It's also a great thing to do. We have a lot of buffer built into that suit-up timeline, and so I absolutely love that we get to do this tradition, get to take part in this tradition. The rules change a little bit, and so the chief or the deputy chief might make up something special specific to that crew. So you can imagine maybe the number 9 is going to feature heavily today or something like that. So the rules change a little bit every time. But yes, you're exactly right. The tradition is that we must play until the commander loses. So we'll see what happens. And yeah, it's great to see they're playing with a card deck that I actually made for them.
Oh, you did?
That's right.
Tell me about that.
It's, well, I guess my last name is Cardman, and so it's trying to live up to the name. But this is something that I've done now for crews that I work closely with. So I've worked closely in the past with Crew 4, Crew 5, now Crew 9. And it's a really fun way to send them off on their launch day. And it's been really neat to draw the crew members as the face cards, actually. So I've got...
Oh, that's cool.
Nick Hague as the king for each suit, and Alexander Gorbunov is the jack of each suit.
Any reason that you chose for those particular?
Well, that just happened to
just work out that way.
Yeah, I followed my instinct there. For Crew 5, it was fun because they had Anna, Koichi, Josh, and then I made Nicole the queen. Yeah, that's right. So their initials kind of lined up nicely with the face cards.
So do you happen to know, it looks like they're getting ready to start the game. Do you know what game they're going to play?
I don't know exactly the rules of today's game.
Well,
only Shannon Walker knows right now,
yeah.
And perhaps, hopefully, Nick and Alex as they're about to start playing.
She's been laying out the rules.
Yeah, it's fun to see them laughing with each other.
Yeah.
It must have been pretty funny. Yeah, this is something to me that just is really the human side of spaceflight.
Absolutely. And it's fun to get this insight. This isn't something that we saw in the past, although it was happening, all the way back to the shuttle missions. But now the astronaut office has said, hey, we'll share this with the public. I greatly appreciate it. We started doing this back in Crew 7, I believe.
That's right, yeah. I love that we get to share this now. I think it's such a privilege to get to fly and represent our countries and the international partnership here. And the more of that story we can share with everyone watching, I think the better.
Seems like Shannon's trying to stretch out the time a little bit as she checked her watch.
That's a good sign, actually. I think they must be doing
true.
well on time. We love having buffer in the timeline. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the background there. Some of the black SpaceX suits. Number 34 is Haley Esparza. She's the manager for all astronaut operations at SpaceX. And fun fact, she's been with every single crew to fly a Dragon since Bob and Doug.
Oh, how about that? Some great consistency there.
That's right.
I'm taking from the body language that Hague may have lost right out of the gate.
Great, we're good to go. Got a good feeling for today.
So that didn't fill a lot of time, but hey,
But
you
hey,
got the
good
result
omens.
that you
We'll
wanted,
take
right?
it. That's
Yeah,
right.
there you go. And you see the tether there on their suits. It's tethered to a box, a briefcase, I guess, as they call it.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what that is and why they have to carry that around.
Yeah, this little suitcase, briefcase-looking thing is actually a portable cooling unit, and these suits are quite warm. It's kind of like wearing a big plastic bag. It is meant to protect you from a lot of different things, but if you are not connected to the environmental control systems of the Dragon spacecraft, they can be quite warm, especially in Florida weather.
Right, this isn't breathable fabric for good reason.
That's yes, all of the right reasons. Yeah, so until they get into their Dragon spacecraft, this is a nice way for them to maintain a happy, healthy body temperature.
All right. And there's a look at the doors at the bottom where the astronauts are headed. Now we have an opportunity to take some social questions that we just talked about. So are you ready, Zena?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. All right, first up, Dustin Burnham asks on X, can you share a surprising or funny story about the preparations for this launch that highlights the human side of space exploration?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, man. As crew members training together for 18 months, we have a lot of opportunities to not only work together, but also travel together, and you get to see each other in many different circumstances. I can attest that Nick Hague is quite good at karaoke.
You don't say.
I do. Yeah, so that's what
like he can really sing.
Oh, well, I would say he's very enthusiastic.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, I see. Is he the guy that, he's always trying to get to the karaoke bar to sing? Or does he kind of push it a little bit?
I think it's an especially nice tradition, for example, when we are training in a place like Japan, where this is one of our international partners, and what better place to do karaoke than in Japan?
No doubt. So we're looking outside the operations and checkout building at T-minus 3 hours, 38 minutes, and counting. This is where family, friends, loved ones have gathered to say goodbye to their astronaut. And let me tell you, the license plate is ready for it, as is the SpaceX Teslas that will head out to the pad. Always a great little tradition that they do with a custom plate.
Yes, I love this tradition. All of the Teslas that have taken Dragon crews to their rocket have had a fun custom license from Haley Esparza, who just walked in front of the camera. She's the mastermind behind those license plates. I suspect this one is a Taylor Swift reference.
Ah, I'm glad you got that.
Uh-huh.
Well, you see the 3 Teslas that are going out there, Teslas 1 and 2. Of course, with just 2 crew members today, they'll be in one Tesla together.
That's right. It would be a lonely ride separate, so I'm glad they'll be together and listening to Pump It Up playlist on their way there.
Well, you can see this is now the hallway back inside the astronaut crew quarters, and some really fantastic artwork that you can see lines the hall there. This has been a recent addition to the hallway. It's just some beautiful stuff there.
Yeah, I absolutely love this addition to such a historic place. And those doors, my goodness, it's amazing thinking how many crews, all of the people who have walked through those doors on their way to orbit.
All the way back to Gemini in the 60s. It has been a long time as we zip over. And, well, there's Rajachari, one of our astronauts, former crew members.
Yeah.
Is out there helping out.
That's right. Rajachari, a classmate of mine, Turtle classmate, and the commander of Crew 3. And he is here as a family escort for Nick Hague.
Okay, so we're looking at the doors that are at the bottom of the elevator, and still haven't had the crew walk out of crew quarters, but there's a lot of stuff to do. They have a schedule. They want to keep to it, and they're going to walk out of there right on time.
That's right. Yeah, leading the way in that black suit there, I think she was number 11, is Katie Bishop. She is the closeout lead for today's mission.
Crew quarters is a pretty big place as you look into the hallway there. Talking about 26,000 square feet, and it takes up the entire third floor.
Yeah.
And the west wing.
That is true. That's true. Yeah, not all of that is used as crew quarters specifically. It also includes a lot of other goings on. Oh, here we see the crew coming down the hallway. Oh my goodness.
Here they come. Crew 9 leaving the suit-up room and now on the move inside astronaut crew quarters.
This is a big moment, and there's so many people who have supported them in quarantine who are lined up in these hallways, wishing them well on their journey. You can see them waving goodbye as they get in these elevators.
Yeah, Alexander Gorbunov on the right, Nick Hague on the left, stepping into the elevator with Shannon Walker.
That's right, and that poster that you see lining the walls of the elevator are signed by so many of the people who have supported this mission here at KSC. It's really humbling to see those posters as you step into those elevators.
A very nice touch and a thumbs up as the elevator doors close. Now they're headed down to the first floor, and as they do so, since we're talking pre-launch traditions, and we had a few of them, here's another one. Both Nick and Alexander signing their mission patch inside crew quarters. The patch shows, of course, the trail of a rocket launching. And you can see a Falcon 9 in there with the number 9 on its beak, along with a crescent moon as its eye. That's a nod to the Falcon 9 rocket in the patch. And we'll have much more on this mission patch with a deeper dive into the design coming up later in the broadcast, which, you know, Zena, your team, when it was your team, all contributed to the design of this patch.
That's right, yes. So this is a patch that I have so much affinity for, and I love the design. Nick and Alex will represent it well today.
And we'll have one astronaut and one cosmonaut. They will soon walk out of the doors here at the Neil A. Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building, so we are focused on the doors. There's Haley, I believe, right?
That's right. That's Haley, number 34, walking out.
You see the patches that the stickers that line the doors, a great tradition there.
Yes. One of
Crew
many
members.
reminders of all the history of this building. It's a moment of big anticipation. See in the blue suit on the right, Raja Chari. They're supporting Nick Hague's family.
And Administrator Bill Nelson is here, NASA Administrator, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
Right there
I saw
in the
him
bottom corner
on
in
the far
blue
right.
shirt. The doors are open on the Teslas. They've allotted about 25 minutes to the pad with a security escort that will lead the way. We've got a on-car camera. We'll follow them as they go out there, so we'll get to see the same things that the astronauts see on their first ride ever out to Launch Complex 40 this time, which has been certified for human space flight. A recent addition to the capability of that launch complex out there at the Space Force, the 45th Space Force Wing, the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station.
Yeah, that's right. This is one of many historic aspects to this Crew 9 mission, and it's neat to have Nick Hague, who is the first person to launch as a Space Force member.
Ah, yes.
Of course, Mike Hopkins transitioned over to the Space Force while he was already on orbit. So he launched as Air Force, landed as Space Force.
An important distinction there, and I believe Nick said in his little crew pack, he's taking the Space Force flag.
Yeah, we get a really small volume of personal items, much of which we tend to take up with gifts. Oh, here they come.
There they are. Nick Hague, commander of Crew 9, with his crewmate, Alexander Gorbunov.
It's a big moment. Family and friends seeing their crew members
This way
in
to
their
space.
suit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll have a chance here to say a few words with those who are closest to them.
Standing at a distance, of course, because the astronauts are quarantined for 2
That's
weeks
right, yeah.
prior to liftoff.
And their closest members of the family have been quarantining with them, but as we are actually getting ready to get on the rocket, we are taking all of the precautions possible.
What's this like for you, Zena, seeing your former crewmates in this moment?
Oh, gosh, at the same time, it is absolutely joyful, and it is also surreal. It's really fun seeing people I know so well in their suits, ready to go. I know firsthand how well prepared they are. They've been doing not only all of the normal training for a mission like this, but additionally working really hard to make that final transition into these roles that they weren't originally planned for. I know that they're ready, and gosh, it's amazing. I know how many people have put a ton of work into this. I'm ready to see them get to the International Space Station and get going on a long expedition. And they'll have a few minutes here to say hello, say some words with their family. There's Haley letting them know it's time to move towards the Teslas. And we'll hopefully have one extra chance for families to come up to the window of the Teslas as they're ready to roll off to the pad. A few final cheers, some photos.
And now they are getting into the Tesla. And as Zena said, the doors will close, the windows will open, and they'll have a few more moments with their family and loved ones.
You can see them hooking back up to that cooling umbilical connected to their little personal briefcases. Get them some air on their way to the launch pad.
Switching from the handheld to the in-car system, right?
The handheld system is actually in the back behind their seats.
So it's all part of it. Okay.
Yeah, but they ditch the little cooling suitcase as they walk out, just less to carry.
Gotcha.
This moment is such a mix of emotions. I know families are all at once so proud of their loved one. It's also incredibly difficult to know that it's going to be a long time before you see them again. Of course, we have a lot of great communications assets. It's really easy to stay in touch, but it is nevertheless really challenging to be a family member on the other side of this. And as a crew member, you are feeling so excited for this launch that's about to happen. You're so ready for it, as this license plate says.
They are ready for it indeed. And you've been down there on the ground as an astronaut support person with these crew members as they've been getting ready to. You were there for Crew 4,
That's right. Yeah, I was the support person for Crew 4. I was a backup crew member for Crew 4 as well. I've been on most sides of this this barrier here. I've been there as a support person, riding in the Teslas with the crew to the pad. I've been a family escort. I've been there as effectively the family member for a crew member. So I've seen it from a lot of different sides. It's really, each one is challenging and humbling so I know firsthand all the work that goes into something like this.
And they are off on their way to Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. You can see the crew driving away from the Neil A. Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building, and this will begin a roughly 20-minute drive with a full security escort across NASA's Kennedy Space Center, including the Vehicle Assembly Building. And there they are, the onboard camera. I just want to follow up on a note that you said. You've seen this from so many sides that by the time you get to space, you will probably be the most highly trained astronaut to ever do a crew launch.
Well, I don't know about that, but I will be ready for it as well, that's for sure.
All right. Well, while we've got the astronaut and cosmonaut in their vehicles headed to the pad, let's hear from them now. And let's start with Commander Nick Hague, who spent 5 months in Iraq in 2004 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Let's listen more from the testimony.
Process is the commitment to making sure that when we launch crews, we're going to bring them home safe.
And we are on the road after hearing some really wonderful words from Commander Nick Hague. I like the part about him looking up at the sky and dreaming about space and translating that to a professional ambition. And here he goes. We also want to invite you to jump in to the conversation we're having right here on air. Send us your questions with the hashtag AskNASA on the platforms Facebook, X, YouTube, and Twitch. Astronaut Zena Cardman is here, and she is answering your questions and doing a great job of it. And so our next question is, well, Luke, who is just 8 years old, asks on Facebook, How tall is the rocket?
Oh, the Falcon 9 rocket is a little over 200 feet tall.
So that's roughly 20 stories if you think of a 20-story building, a hotel or a condominium.
Right. That's right.
I mean, it is a really tall rocket.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so the crew will be taking a long elevator ride up to the top of the launch tower before they can walk across the crew access arm. And at the bottom of the rocket, they'll have a chance to peer up at it from below. And at the top, they'll have a chance to peer over the rail and gaze out at the view. It is really actually amazing to stand on top of one of these launch towers and look out at Kennedy Space Center, many different launch towers here. But today, this one on Launchpad 40, Launch Complex 40, is going to take Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbunov to the International Space Station.
Another question on social now coming from Nico Fuentes. He asks on X, why is Crew 9 launching from a different launch pad?
This is a launch pad that SpaceX has used to launch Falcon rockets from before. This is the first time that we will have actually crew, so people, launching on a rocket from this launch pad. And I think it's great. Now we have more options available. This adds some flexibility to the launch schedule. We have more and more rockets launching every week, and things can get a little complex. We have to not only abide by traffic laws, so if one rocket is launching, another one is not able to launch nearby, but we also have to dodge weather, as we are keeping an eye on today. And so having more than one launch pad is really helpful in maintaining some flexibility.
Initially, Crew 9 was supposed to launch on 39A, but they made the switch due to a number of factors to 40 and did a lot of work to get it ready.
Exactly right. Yeah, actually, this launch pad was not yet even human rated for their original launch date in mid-August.
2 years later, and they are ready for this day. We are now passing Kennedy's iconic vehicle assembly building. As you see, as we pull out the shot here, this is where NASA will stack its Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft for Artemis II, sending 4 astronauts around the moon. It'll be the first crewed mission of NASA's Artemis campaign to establish a long-term presence on the lunar surface for science. And there you see it. What a beautiful shot of the VAB, and there you see at the bottom right the crew on their way. Fabulous.
My goodness, what perspective. Wow.
Well, speaking of Artemis II, the Space Launch System core stage rocket, well, Zenit made its final stop to Kennedy Space Center in Florida before it's going to get ready for launch. The commander of the Artemis II mission was in New Orleans back in July for the big move to KSC. And let's listen in to him now with a closer look at what's next for the SLS.
Hi, I'm NASA astronaut Reed Wiseman, standing here at the Michoud Assembly Facility in Louisiana, and behind me, our Space Launch System core stage is on the move. That booster back there is going to power me, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen around the moon on Artemis II. For the last 3 years, technicians have been manufacturing and assembling our 212-foot-tall Space Launch System core stage. In July, the core stage made the trek on NASA's Pegasus barge and shipped to the Exploration Ground Systems team at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The core stage rocket's arrival now puts the biggest piece of hardware for Artemis II shipped to Kennedy at the Vehicle Assembly Building. It joins the SLS rocket's twin 5-segment solid rocket boosters and the Orion spacecraft, already undergoing testing and checkouts at the spaceport. That's a look at your Artemis Moon Minute.
The Space Launch System, with its 2 propellant tanks and 4 RS-25 engines, is the only rocket that can send the Orion spacecraft, astronauts, and supplies to the moon on a single mission. And as we continue to watch the crew here, they're taking that curve. That is pad 39B. That's a live look as they are passing that pad right now Testing is in the works for the Artemis program there. Last month, teams at Kennedy Space Center.
15 minutes.
Send it, indeed. And there's the top, and that's where they'll pop out. And the crew, as we showed you in our little mini tour, will follow those chevrons on the ground, which are also there in white, high contrast with the black paint, so they can be seen in the case of an emergency egress.
Yep, that's exactly right. This launch tower is well designed for humans. It's part of the long process to get it rated for these crew members, Nick and Alex, today. And there's Luke Delaney, number 43. You can tell by his red name tag, a little bit different than the SpaceX ninjas.
Yeah. And there's some important differences between this crew tower. This elevator takes the crew all the way up to the level of the crew access arm, as opposed to at 39A, they have to actually go up a few flight of stairs.
That's exactly right, which is no easy feat when you're in a suit like this. So quite nice to just go all the way direct in your elevator.
Yeah. Direct flight.
Mm-hmm.
And the crew access arm at 39A actually, I understand, has an incline. So there's a little kind of coming up.
Yeah, that's right. It's a little bit different than 39A.
And here they come. Commander Nick Hague and mission specialist Alexander Gorbunov walking the crew access arm towards their Dragon Freedom capsule.
They are all smiles, and I can understand why.
With phenomenal views to either side of them, walking confidently and certainly anticipating these next few moments where they'll get into the spacecraft and get seated and strapped in.
There's Katie Bishop, who is in charge of today's operations here at the Cape as the closeout lead for the SpaceX team.
She handed a Sharpie to Alexander
This
Gorbunov.
is core on countdown, T-minus 2 hours, 56 minutes.
Another
Crew
one of
have
those
arrived
many
at the White
spaceflight
Room.
traditions, signing the wall of the White Room before you get in your Dragon capsule. And these will be the first signatures on the wall, unlike 39A,
Yeah,
which is
here
actually
we go.
full
They
of
get
signatures.
to be the first. Isn't that something?
Choose a good spot, Alex.
Yeah.
No pressure. Oh, yeah. Very nice.
Good. Boy, yeah. You went big, too.
There's only two of them. They can take up twice as much space as they would.
That's right. Nick is a lefty, apparently.
That's true. Strangely, the astronaut office has, I think, a higher percentage of lefties than most of the U.S. population.
How about that? Wonder why
Random
that
fact.
is.
I don't know. Who knows?
I
Don
tried
had
to
it.
make some kind of observation of left hand, right brain, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that would work. Well, look at this.
What a
Taking in that view.
Yeah, absolutely. I love nighttime launches. Looks really spectacular as the rocket lifts off, but getting to see this view, taking in some final scenes of my favorite planet before getting in your rocket.
That's a great point. You walk down that crew access arm at night, and it's just black, but during a day launch like we have today, I get beautiful vistas the entire way.
Absolutely.
But night is fun for people who watch launches.
Yes,
And
yes.
it lights up the sky.
Yep.
We've got a split screen now showing you the crew access arm, exactly where those astronauts are inside, and then our look inside it on the right-hand side. Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbunov having a little chat there about their final instructions to Ingress, which means just get inside of the capsule. And their signatures, the first two signatures on this wall that no doubt will be filled with signatures over the coming years as crews continue to launch from this now human-certified launch pad.
That's right. The first two of many.
And we've got one already in the seat.
There
Alexander
we go.
Gorbunov taking his spot in what is typically the pilot seat, but as the mission specialist in a crew of two, He'll be sitting there right next to Nick Hague, who now takes his or kind of falls into it.
Yeah, so this is that was really funny to watch, actually, Nick,
on
because
countdown.
he is
2 hours,
used to
53.
training.
Crew have ingressed the capsule.
Used to training in seat number 3, so the seat that Alex is sitting in. You saw Nick lean to the right. He's used to dodging location 8, where the displays are, to the right to get around it. It's one of the many human aspects of training for something like this.
Yes. And while they're getting situated, just wanted to catch you up on the weather brief that we listened to. The launch weather officer, Brian Sizik, in this case, was observing a line of storms that are headed our way over Florida right now. They're coming up from the southwest, and that's what's contributing to our launch day forecast. Our winds are 10 miles per hour out of the south-southwest. Temperature is a nice, warm 87 degrees. And we are 45, well, that should say 45% probability of violation, unless that's changed. I hadn't heard that it did.
It may be evolving as we speak.
It could be.
I'm not sure.
But the concerns that they have are cumulus clouds, flight through precipitation, and surface field electric rules. And so as you're looking now, you can see this is our satellite imagery updated from the GOES satellite live, and you can see from the southwest portion of the state of Florida coming up from the Naples area, that streaming moisture from a stalled boundary that's coming in our direction. Of course, the Cape is indicated by the little point that you see there, the little protrusion along the coast of Florida right there in the center. And so that is heading our way, and he is forecasting that to arrive in about an hour, and says from there we're going to have spotty storms off and on. So you've trained for this mission, so you know this well. As we go along through the count, things really get locked in once you start tanking at T-minus 35 minutes. But at 2 hours and 51 minutes, they can afford to continue to walk along and go through the launch preparation procedures until that moment and see if this is going to be something that could be a problem for launch or not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think in spaceflight and in life, it's important to remember that being an optimist and a realist are not mutually exclusive. And so even as we are continuing to monitor this weather, we are going to progress in hopes of weather clearing and everything becoming go for launch. Of course, once we get to that launch minus 35 minute time frame, as we are making the decision whether to put fuel on board or not, that is a really important decision point.
And so our crew are now getting settled into their seats. It looks like Alexander has his 5-point harness on already and moving through his procedures there.
That's right. Yeah, it's really nice to have some help from these suit techs strapping us in on the ground. The seats are in a slightly more upright configuration than they will be for launch, and so that helps you with ingress, with getting in your seats. But it is still difficult to strap yourself in. You can see Nick is taking care of his shoulder harness straps right now, plugging it into the center point where all 5 points of that harness attach.
It certainly is cozy and comfy, isn't it? I mean, they're elbow to elbow.
Absolutely, yeah. It's pretty roomy inside as spacecraft go. It's a really nice cabin interior. And both Alex and Nick, because they are in the center seats here, can have a longer footrest. The two seats on the exterior can only have a short footrest if you have a large seat bucket. So I'm sure they're grateful for the extra leg room.
Absolutely, because they're going to be there a while.
Uh-huh.
We got a 28-hour transit to the International Space Station once they lift off, and we've got another just a little under 3 hours in this position now. So
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, once they get on orbit, they can get out of their seats and out of their suits as well. But they've got a few more hours to go. And here, where you are not weightless, it's important to be not only safe, but also comfortable.
And I did double check the probability of violation. We still are at 45% probability of violation, so 55% go with the weather, and that hasn't changed. Though, just to briefly recap, there are a line of storms heading this direction set to arrive in about an hour. And Launch Weather Officer says they'll be off and on as they pass over the spaceport. But I have seen, it's rare, I think I actually only saw it one time, 80% no-go. And as long as it's clear right at T0, you got a hole in the clouds.
That's
and
right.
it's clear
You
enough
just
away.
need
10
one
mile
window.
Yeah, that's all you need. Throughout the program, we've been taking your questions from our hashtag Ask NASA sites, which include Facebook, X, YouTube, and Twitch. Zena Cardman, NASA astronaut, has been taking those questions and enlightening those who are curious enough to ask, and we appreciate you sending those questions in. And next up, Zena, Craggy Williams asks, where was your favorite place to train?
Oh, my goodness. You know, I love that we have so many different training centers. A lot of the training that we do is for the International Space Station. And we train all over the world, in Japan, in Star City, Russia, and at the European Space Agency in Germany. Most of my training happens at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, and same for Nick Hague, my crewmate there. I love the facilities that we have at JSC. One of my favorites maybe would be the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, NASA's NBL. This is an amazing million-gallon swimming pool where there is a 1-to-1 scale mock-up of the exterior of the space station, and this is where we train for spacewalks in the EMU, the Extravehicular Mobility Unit. So that's a spacesuit, but different than the spacesuits that you see the crew wearing today.
You can't understate the size of that pool. You mentioned 1 million gallons. This is like a gigantic indoor lake.
It's humongous. It's about 40 feet deep, but it's such clear water. You can see all the way to the bottom. It's really hard to judge the scale of it. But I still remember the first time that I was submerged underwater in the NBL. You look down and your hands are in spacesuit gloves. And that was one of the first moments where things felt really real. As a newly hired astronaut.
Right.
Another one of my favorite places.
Did you pinch yourself, like in that moment? Where
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely surreal. But yeah, what an amazing place to train.
Sorry, you were going to say?
Oh, my other favorite places to train include also the Dragon Training Center in Hawthorne, California, near Los Angeles. This is where SpaceX headquarters is and where actually Mission Control Hawthorne is, so the Dragon operators on the ground, in addition to our Houston Mission Control Center operators. And there in Hawthorne, they have a capsule simulator that is a perfect mock-up of this Dragon spacecraft. It's so real that I've heard crews say they are convinced that the side hatch is going to open, and their lead trainer, in this case, a person named Paul Weiss was our lead trainer for Crew 9. We're just convinced that Paul is going to pop his head through and say, okay, good job on the sim today.
I have heard other astronauts say the same thing.
Absolutely.
When they get in, this moment we're seeing right now with Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbunov is so familiar because of all that training.
Absolutely.
That even the day of launch, that familiarity just takes over and says, oh, this is just the way we train.
Absolutely. It's so important to train in as high fidelity an environment as possible. And of course, there are some aspects of space, for example, the weightlessness, that are very challenging to simulate on the ground. But this capsule, it's really amazing to be able to train in a capsule that's such high fidelity and has exactly the same avionics and software, so that on launch day, you have been through this 100 times, and the training takes over, you know exactly what to do.
That's the confidence you want to have when going to space, which, as we all know, many of us who worked in this industry for a while, it is a business that is not without risk. Our next question is coming from Kyla Ramsey. Kyla Ramsey Garza, I should say. She asks on X, my 6-year-old wants to know, what will Expedition 72 do for their research at the ISS? What kind of science?
Oh, there's so many different experiments that are on board or going to be on board. One of my favorites, I think, is actually ourselves, the human subjects. A lot of the research that we do on the space station is understanding what happens to people when you're in space for a long time. And that's because we're getting ready to go farther afield to places like the moon and eventually to Mars, where we will be spending longer and longer duration. That our body experience in space are very similar to populations on Earth.
Tex Freedom, I'm with you. Got you loud and clear.
Have you the same? Stand by for umbilical comm checks. Seat 2, Seat 3 for umbilical comm check.
Seat 2's got you loud and clear.
We got the loud and clear.
Core has you loud and clear. Umbilical comm checks are complete. Report when you are ready for seat rotation.
Freedom's ready for seat rotation.
Copy. We will report when initiating.
Starting off with some comm checks there, which is a routine part of this procedure.
That's right. That was the core. His name's Shiva in Hawthorne, California, talking to the crew just before seat rotation here.
Shiva is a former SpaceX broadcaster.
Yes,
Dragon, we are initiating seat rotation.
A good communicator.
Yeah, good to hear his
Ready.
voice. I said former. He may be current. I apologize. But he has done launch broadcasts, so I recognize his voice.
Absolutely. And this is someone that Nick and Alex have had the chance to do simulations with in Hawthorne before. So it's nice to have a familiar person on the team.
And there they go, articulating the seats into launch position. Boots up. And now this gives them a vantage point to work those heads-up displays a lot better.
Yeah, that's right. With the seats in the reclined position, it's a lot easier to see and access those displays.
Freedom, seats are in the launch position.
Copies.
And also puts them in a much better configuration for the G-forces that they will feel on launch.
If you just joined us, welcome to our coverage of NASA's and SpaceX's Crew 9 mission, launching from Launch Complex 40. On the left, our flight operations team from the Kennedy Space Center is orbiting Space Launch Complex 40.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for 4.100, Section 2, suit leak check prep.
Freedom copies. Go in Section 2 of 4.100, suit leak check.
You can see them starting to get jet poop.
Instantaneous window.
Over Dragon to ground.
If you're in the area and you are
We first met her at Bob.
minus 2 hours and 16 minutes and
Freedom copies. Thank you.
Hague launched on another Soyuz and carrying with qualifications in spacecraft lean past 54 minutes, just about 6 minutes from now.
Falcon, the way we would do that is we would actually take all of that fuel that we've space station. They will.
Johnson Space Center, Nilifer, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Daryl. Thanks so much. This is Mission Control Houston here in the International Space Station's Flight Control Room here at NASA's Johnson Space Center. The team continues to prepare for launch. Mission specialist.
Space flight.
Now leaving these two as the only one who will be on the pad for several times here on launch day in the true, yeah. We
Great tie-in.
Work on the international.
Get another update that will take.
We will be taking really proud to have been part of this team, getting them players who have spent time on the space station before.
And test pilot with some helium leaks and experienced issues.
Is in the International Space Station. Together we accomplish.
That is going to take the weather.
The investigation will also assess whether the technology can help provide robust telemedicine in space, bearing on future moonwalk
capabilities. So it's really great to see that we're able to accommodate
Safety of the operation. Operator shall call hold on the countdown net.
And Freedom copies. We're go, Section 6.
And there we go. We've got the go from Core in Mission Control Hawthorne for the crew to arm the launch escape system. The crew actually issue that command themselves from the display of Dragon.
SpaceX Freedom, visors are closed, and we are arming the launch escape system.
SpaceX copies.
All of these milestones moving towards the big one, which is tanking Falcon 9 with propellants, which would kick off at T-minus 35 minutes. A update on the weather from Launch Weather Officer Brian Sizik, who informs me that the probability of violation has now, if there was a pad abort,
like someone extremely, extremely heavy, but now we're actually flying with that software.
Load.
Our mission is
discovering new ways to grow crops.
T-minus 29 minutes and counting. And here's now highly trained and...
The good news is having 2 extra sets of hands means
that will connect to the space station. Drag 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, and that gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7
at T0. Now, as
Dragon is prepared to launch itself away from the Falcon 9 in case of an emergency.
Alexander, this is his first launch to space.
We want to commend both Stephanie Wilson and Zena Cardman for their professionalism and for their support of their fellow crew members and friends who are going up today.
That's absolutely right, Daryl. It's an exciting day to be here, and although 50% of us are staying on the ground this morning, we are part of this mission, this Crew 9 mission, and we're so proud to be part of the team that got this Dragon Freedom, Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbunov, ready for flight today. Thinking about another minute or so, we'll hear the next expected call that the crew displays are configured for launch. We'll hopefully hear at that point some great words from our commander.
That's right. Nick Hague is going to have some words for us, so we're going to tune into that. And you and I will join Stephanie outside and watch your friends launch to space. In the meantime, let's send it out to SpaceX in California.
Dragon, SpaceX. Confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
So good news there from Mission Control. And our next major,
as you can see on the screen, we have teams here at Mission Control Hawthorne monitoring. RP1 is that densified kerosene or rocket fuel that propels
degrees away from the vehicle.
Power and liftoff. Crew 9, go SpaceX, go Falcon, go NASA.
Liftoff of Crew 9 now soaring to the International Space Station.
Stage 1 Alpha.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
Those 9 Merlin engines now providing 1.7 million pounds of thrust, propelling Falcon 9 and Crew 9 and continuing to get good calls from teams here on the ground.
Of course, these incredible views mean we are just a little bit past 30 minutes or 30 seconds into our 9th rotational crew mission.
Power, telemetry nominal.
On board Dragon and Falcon 9 with good callouts from Mission Control that everything is looking good. With that, Stage 1 is throttling down to pass through max Q, which is the period of maximum dynamic pressure on Falcon 9 during ascent.
Max Q.
Confirmation of max Q.
Vehicle is supersonic.
And that Falcon 9 is now traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Stage 1 throttle up.
Stage 1 Bravo.
Copy, 1 Bravo.
That call out for 1 Bravo means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage and continuing to get good performance.
And vac chill is underway.
The crew is pulling just over 2 Gs at this point. Next up, we heard the engine chill on the second stage MVAC engine has begun, and then we will have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and the second stages, and then will separate from one another. Then that single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite and continue to carry Crew 9 to orbit while the first stage begins its journey back to Earth. Two minutes in, and the crew is now traveling over 2,600 miles per hour.
Stage 1 is throttling down.
Confirmation there from Mission Control that Stage 1 is throttling down as we prepare for main engine cutoff, followed shortly thereafter by stage separation and second engine start 1. You did hear Mission Control out that we are chilling our... There's confirmation of MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage 2 Alpha.
And back ignition.
Copy, 2 Alpha.
With that, we have had confirmation of MECO, stage SEP, and the ignition of our MVAC engine on board Stage 2. Our next major milestone is going to be the beginning of Stage 1 boost back burn, which is expected in just a couple of seconds here. Of course, if you are just joining us, you've got views of our first stage on the left-hand side of your screen and of MVAC burning with our Crew 9 astronauts aboard up in space on the right-hand side of your screen.
Now we are coming up on 3 minutes and 20 seconds since liftoff today, traveling over 4,000 miles per hour and 76 miles downrange.
As our first stage makes its way back to Earth, we are tracking a landing attempt today at landing zone 1, not too far from where we lifted off in Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Confirmation there that both vehicles
nominal trajectory.
are on nominal trajectories. Everything is looking good.
And we're getting good performance on that single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. The crew's G-load dips right now. We are going to prepare to hit the separation event. Right now they're about 1 G, which is about what we're used to experiencing on Earth. Crew's traveling almost 5,000 miles per hour now and 105 miles in altitude.
As we await the entry burn for our first stage, you are getting great views of it on the left-hand side of your screen. You can also see 2 of our titanium grid fins, which are the primary mechanical structures.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Confirmation there from Mission Control that everything is still looking good.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
Now, as I mentioned, those grid fins are the primary mechanical structures that we use to steer the booster back toward its landing zone, which today is LZ1 at Cape Canaveral. Just as kind of a quick point of reference, those grid fins are about 4 by 5 feet, so roughly the size of a coffee table. Getting our first tracking shots of the booster on its way back to Earth. Again, we are tracking the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen and MVAC up in space on the right.
And we do continue to hear good calls for that second stage. Again, we will see this continue to fire until close to 9 minutes into the flight, now at 5 minutes and 45 seconds since liftoff today. This is accelerating Dragon to more than 17,000.
SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
More good news.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
This second stage is bringing Dragon to more than 17,000 miles per hour. That puts our crew in orbit. And the single Merlin vacuum engine can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space.
Stage 1 does perform 3 burns on its way back to Earth. The first is the boost back burn, followed shortly thereafter by the entry burn. The entry burn is used by Falcon 9 to slow the vehicle down before it reaches the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Nominal trajectory is there from Mission Control.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
That entry burn is, of course, followed by the landing burn, during which time we'll light 3 of the Merlin engines on board the first stage. And we expect to see that landing burn just about a minute before we expect Dragon to be inserted into orbit. So we have 2 very exciting phases of flight, both for our first stage and our Crew 9 astronauts happening here at the same time.
Stage 2, FTX has based.
So a great touchdown of stage 1 there just a second ago. And now, of course, we are continuing to follow our Crew 9 astronauts on their way to space.
And we continue to get good calls for this second stage, that Merlin vacuum engine continuing to fire and propel our crew, now moving over 12,600 miles per hour and 611 miles downrange. Just over 8 minutes since liftoff today, so we are expecting to see this continue to fire until just about the 9-minute mark, at which point this engine will cut off. And of course, Dragon will coast for a few minutes, still attached to the second stage.
Shannon.
That call.
Copy, Shannon.
That call is for Shannon, Ireland. That would be the abort zone if we were to abort at this point in the flight. However, we are continuing to hear good calls about Dragon's performance.
MVAC shutdown.
Confirmation of the Merlin vacuum engine shutting down.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
Good news there from
Freedom
Mission,
copies, nominal orbital insertion.
from Mission Control and our crew that we have had nominal
Dragon,
orbit insertion.
SpaceX, launch escape system disarmed.
Freedom copies, LES disarmed.
In 9 quick minutes, we now have 2 new crew members on their way to the International Space Station, having taken off from Space Launch Complex 40. The crew now being in a good or expected orbit. We'll continue to coast for these few minutes, and then we get our first views inside the capsule of our 2 crew members, Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbunov. They are just continuing to stay in their suits and in their seats during this dynamic portion of the flight. We're going to continue to coast for a few minutes after this second stage engine cutoff. This allows the rates and motion from that long burn to settle out. There are some small reaction thrusters on the upper stage the upper part of the second stage that can be used to counteract any residual motion. That basically makes sure we're in a stable coast before Dragon separates from Falcon, and that'll happen about 12 minutes into the flight. So about a minute and a half from now, we expect to see Dragon actually separating from the second stage. Again, we did hear the crew has been successfully inserted into a good orbit. And again, this is them now in microgravity, one of them, Alexander Gorbunov, for the very first. Coming up on 15 minutes now since liftoff today. You got a quick look inside the capsule.
Dragon, SpaceX, we had a nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts. Nose cone deploy is in progress.
And Freedom copies all. Thank you.
Confirmation there that our nose cone deploy is underway. That means that the 6 hooks that hold the nose cone in place during launch and the ascent portions of flight have begun to retract. That will allow the nose cone to start to swing open and deploy. That will uncover a number of critical systems for the flight up to the space station, including the forward bulkhead thrusters and the docking hatch. Incredible views from our crew up in space on your screen right now, but I'm sure it's nothing compared to the view out of Dragon's window as they make their way to the space station.
I can only imagine. And that journey to the space station will take about 28 hours, so they won't arrive until tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, they will have the opportunity to get out of their suits, to get out of their seats as well, and kind of just enjoy the ride. They're going to shift into some off-duty time. That allows them to prepare any food that they would want to. That allows them to maybe even call down to the ground. They will also obviously get some sleep before a really big day tomorrow, monitoring the arrival and docking to the International Space Station. Of course, we're going to cover all of that live. I'm really looking forward to seeing 2 more crew members float into the orbiting laboratory. And if you're just joining us, we did lift off now at
and the first 3 all-private passenger missions to the International Space Station.
In addition to flying people, excuse me, SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft also enables researchers the opportunity to fly critical science to orbit. And that's just like what we saw with the 3 investigations that NASA's Human Research Program flew on Polaris Dawn. So far, SpaceX and Dragon have carried over 1,000 research experiments to and from low Earth orbit, both to the International Space Station and on our free flyer missions as well.
From DNA sequencing to 3D printing, studies enabled by Dragon and the International Space Station test a variety of technologies, systems, and materials that will be needed for future long-duration exploration missions. Every mission yields critical research and learnings that help make life both on Earth and in space better. And flights like today's help us continue to lay this foundation for our future among the stars and continue our mission to make life multiplanetary.
But for now, we'll be signing off from SpaceX, and we're going to send you back over to NASA. But before we go, we do want to thank NASA for entrusting us with today's mission. And of course, thank you to all of the viewers for being here with us today.
Yeah, it was a really special mission. It was fantastic to see now 2 new crew members in orbit and on the way to the International Space Station. So with that, we're going to end our coverage from Hawthorne until we pick back up with our docking coverage in about 26 hours. So for now, we're going to send it back to you, Zena and Daryl at Kennedy Space Center to wrap up today's launch coverage.
Thank you very much, Leah and Atticus, and welcome back here to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We're just about 25 minutes ago. We watched
training again at some point, and in the meantime,
notably the change from a 4 to a 2-person crew, 2023.
That's right. So in the first
myself, but most
times, but thank you for sharing your insight, your experiences, your knowledge, but most of all, your heart. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Daryl. Go Crew 9.
Go Crew 9. All right, with that, we're going to wrap it up. There's Shannon Walker with the 2 crew members laying out the rules to a card game. Crew 9 leaving the suit-up room and now on the move inside astronaut crew quarters. Nick Hague, commander of Crew 9, with his crewmate, Alexander Gorbunov.
So they'll have a chance here to say a few words with those who are closest to them.
This will begin a roughly 20-minute drive with a full security escort across NASA's Kennedy Space Center.
You can see them doing the SpaceX flight suit lean back.
Walking the crew access arm.
Crew have ingressed the capsule.
Side hatch is closed.
3, 2, 1, ignition, full power, and liftoff. Crew 9, go SpaceX, go Falcon, go NASA.
Liftoff of Crew 9 now soaring to the International Space Station.
1 Alpha.
1 propulsion is nominal.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
Those 9 Merlin engines now providing 1.7 million pounds of thrust, propelling Falcon 9 and Crew 9 and continuing to get good calls from teams here on the ground.